Bills, Broncos at Mile High. At night, we got the Niners taking on the Seahawks. And Sunday, Foxborough's going to be bumping. Texans, Patriots, 3 p.m. And your night game, Rams, Bears. 8 teams remain. Only 4 will survive. Let's talk about it with 7-year NFL veteran Adam Archuleta and Tennessee Sports Hall of Famer, CBS Sports analyst Charles Davis. Great to see you guys. Let's start with Bills Broncos. Charles, coming to you first. Josh Allen is limping into this one. A wide receiver room that has just 3 players available. So not only are they banged up, they're going through 2 time zones. They're dealing with the higher altitude against a Broncos team fresh and ready to go off the bye. One of the toughest defenses in the NFL. Charles, how did the Bills survive this one?
Claudia, first of all, hello. And Adam, it sounds like they should just cancel the game for the Bills, doesn't it? But the bottom line is we all know that they have a quarterback wearing number 17 that he can throw on the cape at any time. To me, Adam, the way this game breaks down very easily is, can they limit how many times he has to go to the phone booth and put on the cape? And to me, that means tight ends. That means Dalton Kincaid. It means Dawson Knox. I know they started the clock on Curtis Samuel to come back and help. Brandon Cooks has been a late season addition. He'll probably have to be a true wide receiver 1 because he's a downfield target. Khalil Shakir, most of his catches are within 2.5 yards of the line of scrimmage, although he makes people miss. So to me, this is where it has to come into play. Can these guys make plays? And can they get bonus content out of Keon Coleman, who they drafted to catch slants, stops, and fades, and he's catching maybe 1 ball per game when he's active? Can they get more out of him so that Superman doesn't have to go to the phone booth each and every series?
Well, that's the question, because now he's facing one of the toughest fronts in football, and he always puts the cape on. But heading into last week, he had the knee, then he had the foot. He was in the medical tent twice. Adam, so what's your level of concern for Josh Allen, Superman, against this front?
Well, first, let me just respond a little bit to what Charles said, because it can't be that easy. You can't let all the superstar quarterbacks be on the shelf and give them a clear path to the Super Bowl. So you got to make it somewhat challenging on Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. But, you know, as I see it, it comes down to how do they handle pressure? And he's been pressured more this season than he has in his entire career, and he's taken more sacks. And I just still have that image of the way they played against Houston. Remember that primetime game, Charles, where he was battered and bruised, and that Texans defense really got after him. Now, that doesn't mean that past his prologue to this game. I thought he handled, and that team handled pressure last week exceptionally well. But the Denver Broncos are a different animal. With Nick Bonito and all those man pressures that they send, they know how to get after the quarterback. And you already mentioned it. The fact that Patrick Surtain is on the other side of that defense, you're right. They are going to have to lean on the backs and the tight ends. And the run game, which has been as good as anybody in the National Football League all season, they have to get more out of it than they did last week. I thought Jacksonville did a tremendous job last week containing the run game. But they had a few coverage errors that led to those big play moments. And that's what Denver can't allow Allen to do, is those critical moments, being able to pull a rabbit out of the hat and getting that big play down the field.
Yeah, Bills get rewarded defeating the number 1 run defense in the Jags by facing the number 2 run defense in the Denver Broncos. We'll see how it goes down. Let's move on to Niners and Seahawks, which is an interesting one because both teams very familiar with each other, of course, with it being a divisional matchup. The Niners continue to win. If we're talking injuries, they are the first team that comes to mind despite all of these injuries. Seahawks coming off the bye, but Sam Darnold somehow injured himself in the off time. Adam, if we're talking storylines, what is the biggest one that stands out to you?
Well, you know, to me, I think I look at San Francisco, because certainly they're the underdog in this, with Seattle being the number 1 seed coming off their bye, and the fact that Seattle beat them the last time they played. And so I'm looking at this game from the standpoint of what does San Francisco have to do to win, and I'm looking at their defense first and foremost. I think Robert Saleh, really the entire staff, has done a tremendous job in mitigating injuries. But the fact that this defense, with one of the worst pass rushes in the National Football League, has been able to play and play well, to me says a lot about his coaching. So you know that it's going to be a hard time for them to get pressure on Sam Darnold. So the key is, and this is an absolute must, they have got to stop the play action pass in the downfield passing game, because that connection between Darnold and the play action and Jackson Smith and Jigma is as good as there is in football. And that's kind of been their formula. If they could limit that, They play great situational defense. They are a very good red zone defense. So that has to be their formula. Tackle well, play fundamentals, don't give up the cheap shot, and really play your best football in the red zone. If they can do that, then they can keep the points close and let that offense try to stay on the field.
Yeah, you talk about that pass rush, pretty much non-existent. Myles Garrett had more sacks than the entire defense combined. Charles, when you look at this game, what is your approach? What is the storyline that stands out to you?
Well, before I get into that, what Adam has articulated is so spot on, right?
Yeah.
The great coach from Kyle Shanahan that doesn't get the respect I think it deserves. Imagine, Adam, if he had won one of those 2 Super Bowls he'd been in, we'd be talking about him in a different breath. But I think that your point is well taken. He's a terrific coach. And then on the defensive side, what Robert Saleh is doing despite all the injuries, I think they're going to try the same type of formulas they had against Philadelphia. They made Jalen Hurts play quarterback completely in that game. They're going to try and do the exact same thing to Sam Darnold. But I'm going to take it from the Seattle defensive perspective, because a player who plays like Adam Archuleta did in his prime, Nick Emanwari, the rookie out of Seattle, he's all over the place, okay? You name it, he's played it. Adam, you got to see him during the season. He's playing backer. He's playing safety drop down. He's playing high safety. He's in the slot. They'll take him off and rush him off the edge occasionally. Not many rookies can absorb that volume of defense and be able to do it proficiently. And here's where I think he gets a break, Adam. George Kittle's injury. Because now, instead of having to worry about that tight end, extra coverage and those things, I think Mike McDonald and the defensive staff get to put him in other places now, and just he can be relentless the entire game, because that threat from the tight end position is not the same for the 49ers without George Kittle.
Poor Jake Tonjes. He's out there. He's making some moves when George Kittle's not there. Charles, let's talk about Sunday.
No disrespect to Jake Tonjes.
No disrespect, of course. Nobody's George Kittle. Nobody's George Kittle. Sunday kicks off with Texans and Patriots. Drake May, Mike Vrabel getting their due credit for the success this season. But Charles, how about OC Josh McDaniels? How important is he in a game like this, in the playoffs, competition tougher, stakes getting higher? Talk to me about OC.
I think he's vital in this ball game. And Adam made a great point about the Houston pass rush and what they did to Josh Allen. We saw what they did to Pittsburgh as well. We've seen what they've done down the stretch against so many people. So if you are New England, that is a prime concern of yours. So you've got to do all sorts of things to keep pass rush off of Drake May. That's where Josh McDaniels comes into play as an offensive coordinator. How he calls the early down offense, first and second down, to keep them out of third and long. Heck, keep them out of second and long, where they can just tee off and go after the young quarterback. His acumen will help tamp things down if at all possible, whether he's using the running game, the short passing game, you name it, anything he can to keep them out of that. The second thing is nursing this young quarterback through another ball game. Adam, we had him earlier in the year against Atlanta, and things were rocking along, and then there came some trouble. A fumble in the pocket, an interception downfield, and you can see the confidence wilt a little bit in the youngster. So what did Josh McDaniels do? I'm going to take away the throws downfield. I'm going to give him nothing but short stuff. We'll use the running game more. And the last 2 series of the game, he essentially carried him across the finish line and gave him his confidence back. He may need something like that in a game of this magnitude, especially the way that Houston buzzes the tower anytime they come after the quarterback.
Yeah, Drake May's not Josh Allen, but Adam, he puts that cape on often because, as we know, heading into this season, the offensive line much better, but it's looking a little young as it is on that left side. What's your level of concern for Drake May under center?
Well, I'm really excited for this game because as I look at it, all the attention is on that Houston defense. And it is for good reason. But I look at it, and I think that New England actually matches up quite well against them. And when I look at Drake May, I look at a quarterback who is aggressive. He's one of the best quarterbacks under pressure. I think he has about 8.8 yards per attempt under pressure. It's just as good as it's been of any quarterback in the National Football League in about 7-8 years. And so I love how aggressive he is down the field. And then when I look at matchups, they have great players in that secondary for Houston, and there's not a lot of holes with Stingley and Petrie and Lassiter and Bullock. But I like the matchups that New England has. I like the way they use their running backs. They're going to use every inch of the field, horizontally, vertically, in between, in the seams. I think Hunter Henry, against zone coverage, has really found a home. If it's cover 3, they're going to hit the corner route. If it's anything else with 2 high safety, he has a knack on key down and distances of working the middle of the field. I love Kayshon Boutte down the field. Charles, he's not a 6'3" wide receiver, but he sure plays like one with his ability to go up and get those 50-50 balls and contested catches in key situations. And we haven't even got to Stephon Diggs yet. You know what he brings and what he commands. So I think Drake May is processing. I think he has great command of where to go with the football. I love how he's able to handle pressure. And I do think they have the weapons and the coaching to be able to try to maximize and find some matchups against that defense.
MVP Drake May, Adam?
This is the case. This is the game where you make your case. I mean, if this is, to me, this is the testing point on how he plays. And if he is able to pass this test, we'll see how Stafford does against the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, well, great intro there into this last game on the slate, Rams at Bears. All we've been hearing about in this one is the cold weather and how Stafford plays in the cold weather and the index finger injury. But really all I think about is the will of these cardiac Bears. So Adam, I'm going to throw it back to you. How does this one end? And is Stafford the MVP or is it Drake May?
Well, listen, I've actually studied the Chicago Bears quite a bit because I had the Green Bay Packers in my last game of the season. And so I spent a lot of time on the Bears. And I think it is truly remarkable. You know, so often we hear about the play calling genius and the offensive coordination of Ben Johnson. But what does that really mean? Well, I thought it was on full display in their last game against the Green Bay Packers. In crunch time, he was always one step ahead of that Green Bay defense. To me, it's all about knowing your personnel and who you're playing against if you're the Rams. You know at the end of the game, if it's close, Ben Johnson has a great feel for what your go-to plays are, what your tendencies are, and how to exploit it. So you cannot be predictable if you're Chris Shula. And then you also have to know that if you do one thing, you cannot let Caleb Williams escape the pocket. You can't allow him to put on a double cape. You can't allow him to create magic. You have got to make it hard on him. So often in these late games, you hit great play calling with the combination of defensive breakdowns. If one thing that we've learned from watching Caleb Williams this year is that when the game is as tight as it can be, he's going to be able to find the matchups and make that magical play. So they have their hands full, and they got to make sure that they don't get predictable in those end-of-game moments. But I do think if Stafford does play well, the MVP is his to lose, unless you get an all-timer from Drake May.
Which they will. I'm a Patriots fan, if you guys didn't know that. I'm going to be at the game, so I think we're going to get an all-timer. We'll see. Charles, what's your breakdown of this game?
Well, we had no clue that you were a Patriots fan at all when you were asking about Drake May and MVP. I don't think either one of us picked up on that, but if we got confirmation, that's for sure. Look, everything Adam is talking about, again, right there, detailed the whole deal. And I think that the Caleb Williams ability to make plays out of the pocket really came to the front because he got better at playing on time on normal downs and distances. That allowed breaking out of the pocket to be much more of a better tactic for him as opposed to the run around a lot as he did at USC, Oklahoma, and early stages with the Bears. He has really come into his own, and as Adam said, he'll sting you downfield in a big way. Kind of reminds me of Aaron Rodgers in his prime when he did break out of the pocket. Remember, Adam, he wasn't throwing the 5-yard check down. He was throwing downfield to kill. And that's exactly what Caleb Williams does. For me, flipping it over, though, these Rams don't care about the weather. Last year, they played the best game of the playoffs against the champion Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia in the snow, and they were 2 pass rushes away by Jalen Carter from maybe pulling that one off and going to the Super Bowl themselves. So this team doesn't worry about weather. Sean McVay's been there before as a head coach, has won a Super Bowl. He knows what it's like. And, of course, the wily veteran Matthew Stafford with much to prove because he may have locked down the MVP earlier in the year, save for that Monday nighter against Atlanta, that put it back into the balance with him and Drake May. The votes are already in, folks. We'll find out who wins it. But in the court of public opinion, these 2 ball games may determine who the public thinks is the MVP. I think Stafford's going to play well in this one. I think they'll move the football fine. And where Chicago on defense wins is they take the ball away. You move it against them, but they take it away and they take possessions. I don't think the Rams are going to give them the football. And then you flip it over. Verse, Fisk, Spates, that defensive front and getting after Caleb Williams to protect their corners, Kobe Durant, and especially Emmanuel Forbes. If they can do that and not screw up on special teams as they had recently, I think the Rams have a heck of a chance to go into Chicago and win this one.
Well, Rams fans can't get too excited even if they get a big lead, because the Bears have 7 wins when they're down in the final 2 minutes of the game. That is an NFL record. They have 3 wins when they're down 10-plus points in the final 5. The rest of the league has 3 wins combined. So Rams fans, make sure you have a big cushion before you get excited. Charles Davis, Adam Marchellette, appreciate you guys.